Am I the asshole for returning a birthday gift I got from my boyfriend after he insulted me about my colorful past? This happened last night, but my phone is still blowing up. I, female 26, dipped into my savings and got Mike, my boyfriend, 27, a PS5 for his birthday yesterday. He knew he was getting the PS5 because he told me that the PS5 is the only thing he wants. We've been together for 4 years, so the cost didn't matter. That is, until I found out what he thinks of me. Some background. When I was 18, I was involved with Jake, a guy who I met online. We ended things after 3 months, and I moved on shortly after with Adam, a guy from work. I found out a couple of months later that Jake and Adam were actually really close friends, but I didn't know Jake long enough to meet his friend group, so I had no idea. After finding out, I took some time off dating, and 2 years later, I met my current boyfriend, Mike. I was upfront and honest with Mike about my past and the fact that I was unintentionally involved with friends. He said he understood, and my past didn't bother him. Last night at his party, I showed up with the PS5, and him and his friends were screaming with joy. His best female friend, Jessica, laughed and said, quote, "I wish I was a thought so I could afford a PS5 too." I looked at her with a "excuse me" look on my face, and she just said, "Never mind," and walked away. I confronted my boyfriend about it, and he said, and I quote, "She's just messing with you. You can't take a joke." So I pushed further as to why this girl is even calling me names to begin with. And he said, quote, "Well, everyone knows you were a thought before you met me." I asked him to explain how I was a thought before him, and he said, quote, "You know, messing with best friends." He then patted me on the shoulder and said, "It's okay, because I'm not who I was back then, and if he could get over my, quote, colorful past and thought mentalities to give me a chance, then I could get over Jessica's comments and give her another chance." I didn't say anything. I just got up, took the PS5 from the gift table, and left. He was pissed. He literally called me 20 times, but I didn't care. I was so hurt that I took the bow off and took it straight back to the store I got it from. They happily refunded it. I thought that was done, but Mike and all of his friends, including Jessica, are berating me for being petty, and they're all saying I brought this on myself by making poor choices. I responded to Mike and told him that he deserves better than me, so find someone who wasn't a thought and get the PS5 from them, because I returned it. He started screaming how I'm the biggest asshole for returning it and how I should be happy he ignored my colorful past. I'm thinking maybe taking it back was too far.
Am I the astronaut for thinking about divorcing my husband for cheating on me with cake? I, female 32, just found out my husband, male 31 of 3 years, has been cheating on me, and I don't know for how long. The past few months have been pretty rocky for us. I struggle with my mental health, and I am diagnosed with depression, and I take medication for it. But sometimes I still feel off, and I go through periods of time where I'm not exactly myself. I'm not rude or mean, I'm just out of sorts. But my husband has always complained about this. Not in a toxic way, or so I thought. He just always said that he felt disconnected from me during these periods of time. I'd been going through one of those times, but my husband seemed much more content with it this time. I thought it was because he was beginning to understand that it wasn't because of him, but just because I'm struggling with difficult thoughts. But one night, while we were in bed, my husband went to take a shower, and I begrudgingly decided to snoop on his phone. I felt so bad about it, but I let my intrusive thoughts get the best of me. To my surprise, I found an interesting name in his Snapchat conversations. Cake. It's pretty normal to give people nicknames on Snapchat, so I didn't panic at first, but the Bitmoji was a woman. I went through their chat, and most of it was empty, except for a chat saved that had an address number. I looked up the address, and it was an apartment building about 20 minutes away from us. This stayed on my mind for the entire next day. I tried to brush it off and told myself that I was overreacting, but I couldn't. So I ended up going to the address and knocking on the door. Well, that's ballsy. To my surprise, Cake was the name of a woman he had been hiring to have some fun with behind my back. I was crushed. I couldn't believe my husband had done that to me. I went home and waited for him to get back from work, and when he did, I confronted him. It was something along the lines of me screaming at him for effing some random girl named Cake. He told me that I hadn't been as loving to him, and he was feeling alone and vulnerable. I'm crushed. I'm writing this while sitting in the bathroom. I told my husband to go stay with his friends while I figure out what to do. I feel bad for not being as loving, but really, Cake? A girl named Cake? I just don't know what to do. I don't know how long this has been going on. I tried to ask the girl about it, and she brushed it off as something that happens a lot with a lot of people. Should I divorce him? Am I the astronaut for this? Please help. Update number 1. Hello all, thank you for your kind comments on my post. I'm not sure why it got taken down, but I'm still amazed with the amount of commenters and support that I have received. I have been spiraling so much and life has gotten crazy. I went and got tested the day after I confronted my husband about Cake. Yes, to those of you who are inquiring about the name, Cake is not her actual name, but the name she uses for transactional relationships. I tested positive for something, unfortunately, but it's easily fixable. I've spent a lot of time trying to clear my mind and get my mental health straightened out. I took the week off of work so I could have a moment to breathe and talked to my mom about everything. We aren't very close, but it was helpful. I still haven't spoken to my husband, but I plan on doing so later today. We're going to get everything out in the open and discuss what our next steps are. I do think I'm going to ask for a divorce. To everyone who said I wasn't being emotionally available in the comments, you may be right. I am in the wrong, but when these things happen, I become detached and cannot help it. I still don't think that justifies cheating, even if it's a transactional relationship. When we got married, we promised each other through thick and thin we would support each other, and that promise was broken. I have nothing against the woman he cheated with. She was just doing what she does for a living. It wasn't emotional. It's my husband I have an issue with. I have some negative feelings, but that's mine and my husband's problem. I may update again after our conversation. Thank you. Okay, update number 2. Here we go. My husband has been cheating on me for almost a year and a half. I found out after snooping through my husband's phone that he had been cheating on me with a woman who he called Cake. It was transactional and he was paying for some fun behind my back. We had been going through a rough patch in our relationship and I had been struggling with depression and had become reserved, so he felt detached and tried to blame his cheating on my mental problems. Earlier, we had our first conversation about it since he left to stay with a friend. I said we needed to lay out everything and be completely honest. Cake was not the first. In a long line of women he has apparently been using to fill his emotional needs that was created by my complete disregard of our marriage and his physical needs. All I could get out of him was that he slept with multiple different women and it has been going on for a while. When I told him that I got tested, he said that he knew he had contracted it in the past and never told me. It wasn't even a year ago we had discussed maybe having a baby. He has apparently been going out and getting with all sorts of women like this, partying with people I do not know, and has been taking painkillers. This is not the man I married. I'm completely shattered emotionally. I asked him for a divorce and he told me I was being manipulative by trying to make him seem like the bad guy when I'm the one who caused it all. I know he is gaslighting me, but I feel there is some truth to what he is saying, as some of the commenters on my previous post have also mentioned. I'm devastated and my life is in ruins, but I'm going to try and pick up the pieces and power on because that's all I can do. He left the house again in a tantrum, slamming the door and knocking a couple of picture frames down. He's pretty upset about me wanting a divorce, but I can't see any other path out of this. What he did is irredeemable in my eyes. Thanks to all who commented nice things. I don't know if I'll update again.
I secretly filmed my daughter and discovered why all the babysitters were quitting their jobs. My name is Anna Julia, and I couldn't understand why all the babysitters I hired ended up resigning so quickly. In less than 1 month, 13 different babysitters had already been through my house. As I work almost all day, I always need someone to take care of my daughter. Initially, when hiring younger babysitters, I thought they quit because they weren't as adapted to the job. So I decided to hire a more experienced babysitter when a friend recommended a 62-year-old lady named Sandra. At first, everything went very well, and Sandra, the new babysitter, had no complaints about my daughter. I was completely relieved, believing that I had finally found the right babysitter for my daughter. But unfortunately, even before completing 20 days as my daughter's babysitter, Sandra also receded. Concerned about the situation, I decided to visit Sandra at her home to find out the reason for her resignation. Initially, Sandra hesitated to tell me the truth, but as I pressured her, she ended up saying to me, "Your daughter is not normal. You should urgently take her to a specialist or even to a church." Still not satisfied with Sandra's response and wanting to understand my daughter's behavior better, I asked Sandra to explain the situation in more detail. So I said, "Tell me, Sandra. Speak up, woman. I want more details." Sandra simply remained silent and asked me to leave her house and not come back. Sandra's attitude left me even more intrigued with the situation, which increased the mystery and my curiosity even more. So, on the way back home, I had an idea to buy cameras and place them hidden throughout the house. After installing cameras in all the rooms of the house, I hired another babysitter. Every day when I left for work, I prayed that this current babysitter would work out. But unfortunately, she only managed to stay with my daughter for 5 days and, without giving concrete reasons, also resigned. I couldn't handle this situation anymore. I was completely outraged and wondered what could be happening. That's when I decided to go to my home office and started watching the recordings from the cameras I had installed around the house. I had to find out something, and when I began to watch the video recordings, I was surprised and very frightened by everything I was seeing before my eyes. After placing hidden cameras to monitor my daughter, I ended up discovering why more than 15 babysitters resigned from the job. When I started watching the video, I didn't find anything strange in my daughter's behavior. She seemed to behave like any other normal child. She still appeared to get along very well with her babysitters, being affectionate and loving, but the camera footage would still reveal other facts that I never imagined could happen inside my home. So, I continued to scrutinize every detail of the video meticulously. Until one of the images showed my husband returning to our house 1 hour after we left together to go to our respective jobs. He then entered our house, went to the refrigerator, opened a bottle of wine, and, after having a few glasses, called my daughter by her name, summoning her to the kitchen. My daughter then came down to him, gave him a kiss on the cheek, and said, "What do you want, Daddy?" My husband then said, "How about watching that movie you like on the big TV in Daddy's room?" My daughter, happy and cheerful, said, "Yes, I want to, Daddy." At that moment, the images made my heart race, and I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. So I asked the following question: did I marry a monster, a criminal? That's when the images surprised me once again. After my husband entered our room with our daughter, he turned on our TV and put on the movie my daughter loved so much. To my surprise and relief, my husband didn't stay in the room, nor did anything wrong to our daughter. He simply left her alone there and headed towards the babysitter. Approaching the babysitter, he said he needed to talk to her. Then he turned and said, "I don't want you to come back to work anymore. I'm giving you 3 months' salary, but you can't come back to this house. And there's one more condition. Tell my wife that the problem is related to our daughter's behavior, and that it's impossible to take care of her this way." The babysitter then asked him, "But why, sir? Should I do this if your daughter is lovely?" My husband then said, "It's nothing against you or any other babysitter. It's because I love spending time with my daughter, and I don't want anyone else taking care of her except me or my wife. I also don't like having another woman in my house who isn't my wife." So, the maid accepted the money and left. As soon as she left, he called my daughter again and asked if she wanted to go to the park. They got ready and left together, playing and happy.
So, a few months ago, I posted a story. A guy was asking if he was the asshole for always leaving his girlfriend's closet door open. He constantly left her closet door open. She, had gone through trauma. He moved into her house and accidentally left the door open all the time. And then she would freak out because she'd wake up and the door would be open and she would say something to him first thing in the morning and he would be all pissed off about it. Girlfriend found out about his Reddit post and made her own Reddit post and just, put all the shit out there about how he was damn near abusive and she had gone through trauma and that's why she needed her closet door to stay closed. I have an update from the ex-girlfriend. She came across my video and she sent me an email with more information and a small update. "Hello, beautiful. I'm not sure if you remember me, but you read my Reddit post called "I Dumped My Boyfriend for Leaving My Closet Door Open" a few months ago. I wanted to personally thank you for your kind words. I wasn't really expecting anyone to read my story considering how childish it must have sounded. A lot has happened a week after I originally posted. Some good, some bad, and some even worse. The good news is that I was able to officially move from my apartment to my older sister's and my brother-in-law's house last month. They have a spare bedroom with one of those freestanding closet organizers, so no more creepy closets for now. That's awesome. I didn't give up putting up glow-in-the-dark stickers either. My brother-in-law and my nephew decorated a side of the wall to make it look like the Northern Lights with some glow-in-the-dark paint. I absolutely love the support that you have. I love it. I think it's amazing. In August, I celebrated what would have been my ex's and I 3rd year anniversary with my older sister and my old roommate with a trip to Brazil. I went to see my grandparents and other relatives from my mother's side of the family. I didn't tell them exactly what happened, but just that I needed a small break from everything that happened. They just know that my ex and I broke up because he was acting out of line. Period. That's all they need to know. For right now, that's all they need to know. Although we only spent a small amount of time there, I felt refreshed. I was taking a break from all of my social media, but I kept my phone on in case my parents needed me. Once I arrived back in the US, I logged into my socials and I had a bunch of DMs from who I can assume were my ex's family telling me a bunch of horrible racist shit. They said things like how I should go back to Mexico. I'm not even Mexican, I'm Brazilian. They said things like how they wished the man who was in my closet had done worse. Like SA'd me, unalived me, things like that. At this point, I had had enough because why was I being blamed for everything? Because behind every trash man is a disgusting ass family telling him that everyone else is the problem. I went to my apartment and my ex was waiting by the entrance since you need a key to get in. He was begging for forgiveness, oh God, saying that he'd never hurt me again. I told him that if he really loved me, he would have never tried to make me quit my job. He wouldn't have ran to the internet for validation from strangers instead of talking to me. He wouldn't have his racist ass family members harassing me. If he loved me, then he needs to prove it by keeping his family and his frat friends in line. But that sure as hell doesn't mean I'll be taking him back, though. That's what the fuck I'm talking about, girl. Things were quiet for a few days since I came back from my vacation, until I started dealing with a lot of nausea and vomiting. Things were quiet for a few days since I came back from my vacation, until I started dealing with a lot of nausea and vomiting. It didn't occur to me that I missed my period since I have an irregular cycle, and sometimes I'll go 2 months without menstruating. I decided to take a pregnancy test, and well, turns out I'm pregnant. A lot of things were running through my head, and I had a mental breakdown. Luckily, my old roommate was staying with me for a few weeks. The bastard who was trying to get me pregnant was successful. My old roomie told me that I should end the pregnancy so I wouldn't be tied to this man for the rest of my life. My parents and my older sister said it's not their place, but it's my own to decide what I should do, and regardless of what I'll do, they support me. After a lot of discussions with my therapist, I've decided to keep the baby. I booked a therapy session for me and my ex to attend together. I can't say too much of what we discussed for privacy's sakes, but I did get my main suspicions confirmed. He wasn't influenced by Tater Tot. She called him Tater Tot or any of these podcast bros, but by his frat friends. They were supposedly making fun of him despite me being a year older than him, as well as being female, I managed to have more life experience, such as moving out of my parents' home, graduating college, and having a full-time job. Basic adult stuff. His friends were really telling him that he needed to train me into submission, so once he's moved in, he can be at ease. This is where the closet doors start coming into place. They told him to use my triggers to discipline me. So when we had our minor arguments, he would conveniently leave the door open as a punishment. He said he got some enjoyment out of it because in his mind, when I was dealing with my paralysis, he got to comfort me and he liked being the white knight. He also admitted that he wanted to turn me into a nervous wreck so I would lose my job, but he underestimated how much of a workaholic I am, so I still managed to be fine even with pulling all-nighters. There was also an incident where my very important documents from the company I work at went missing. But I always keep everything on a hard drive, so I had backups. So yeah, there were lots of attempts of sabotage, plus the foods he was recommending to boost my fertility, which did unfortunately work. Last thing I told him during our session was that I was pregnant with no intentions to rekindle our relationship for our child's sake. There was a look of panic in his eyes when I mentioned my pregnancy. All he said was, "I'm too young. I still haven't finished college." He didn't actually want to be a father. So I gave him an ultimatum. He surrenders his parental rights and no child support. None of his family members can know of my pregnancy, and I'll disappear from his life and we can both move on. I felt somewhat bad, but why should I be tied to someone who caused me so much distress? He agreed with the condition that he can check up on me during my pregnancy. I said yes, so that's where things are in that part. He also managed to get his family members who were harassing me to stop completely. As far as my trauma, I've gotten a lot of DMs recommending that I do EMDR, and for my child's sake, I'm gonna have to do something since I want to overcome my PTSD in case another asshole wants to use my trauma against me. I'm not sure if the treatment's gonna work, but I won't know unless I try, right? As far as what I'm gonna do with my child, I'm still not sure, but my mom and my older sister have been helping me. Anyways, I want to thank you again for the things that you said. This is gonna be my last update. Thank you and stay safe.
Am I the asshole for not eating food my girlfriend's parents made at family dinner? My girlfriend of 4 years has a different cultural background than mine. Her parents are not from America, and family and meals are very important to them. I grew up in America, and while we had holiday dinners and maybe a Sunday dinner every couple of weeks, for the most part, mom or dad made something, and then we eat it where and when we wanted. I eat dinner with my girlfriend's parents every week, and I love it. It is important to her, and I have no problem with the different cuisines. It's all delicious food. However, I do not eat a lot. Growing up, I was very overweight and saw a nutritionist, stuck to a calorie deficit and worked on my portions, and have been at a healthy weight ever since. My relationship with food has changed, and I no longer have the desire to tear through 2 double quarter pounders anymore. My girlfriend's parents seem to get offended that I get small portions of things and don't fill my plate up a second time. They will make maybe 5 to 6 different food options, and I'll get a little bit of everything because I want to taste it all. At some point, every time I'm there, they ask me if I didn't like the food. They mention the small portions and how I never go back for more. I just honestly tell them I don't want to overeat. They never made a scene about it to me, but I guess they've been discussing it with my girlfriend while I am not there. A couple of days ago, my girlfriend told me that her parents feel offended over how little I eat, which a little is a 100% full plate with a bit of everything made. And some days I eat less and some days I eat more. It really just depends. If I skipped breakfast and had a light lunch, I might fill up more for dinner. But if, for example, I got a decent breakfast, work catered sandwiches that day, I'm going to get a normal, small sized dinner. My general goal is to have equal-sized meals each time, but with a busy work life, that is not always possible. So some days I didn't really have food until family dinner, and I'm eating more than usual. My girlfriend asked me if it were possible that I could eat a little bit more just for one day of the week. She didn't push or demand, just asking if it was possible. I told her that I don't want to ruin my mended relationship with food. I don't understand why the parents are so offended. I always pack up Tupperware and eat it throughout the week because it's delicious food. I don't want to disrespect her parents, though.
My fiance cheated on me with my father. My wife Elle and I met in her freshman year of college. We were both dorming in the same building where we eventually met. We later found out we lived 2 towns away from each other, so whenever we went home, I let her drive with me. It was only added like 20 minutes, so it was no big deal. We got really close during those trips, and we would share our intimate selves to each other. I felt a very deep and personal connection with her rather quickly. After multiple trips and hanging out at school, we started to date. I have a close-knit family, as did she, so we told our families right away. I had met her family plenty of times when dropping her off, but it was nothing more than an introduction and exchanging pleasantries. Both of our families accepted each other with open arms, and our relationship grew. I was a year ahead of her, so when I graduated, I went home where I was offered a good job with great pay. I visited her at school whenever I got the chance, and whenever she came home, we would make time for each other. After she graduated, she moved in with me. After living together for about 3 years, I proposed, and we've been planning our wedding since. Looking back, there were plenty of things I overlooked that I just wrote off thinking my father was just trying to welcome my ex into our family. Things like my father calling her all the time, and if I was around, they would just tell me they were talking about the upcoming family party or something along those lines. One time, Elle was in the shower and her phone rang. I saw it was my dad, so I answered. When he realized it was me, he sounded both upset and surprised that I picked up. I then asked, "What's up?" He responded that he wanted to talk to Elle about my mother's birthday that was in a week. And after a minute, we ended the call. I feel like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. On the day I found out, it was like any other day. I'll have Thursdays off. So she made breakfast for both of us. When I set out for work, she gave me a kiss and told me to have a great day. During my drive to work, I realized I had forgotten some paperwork I would need for a meeting I had at 3 p.m. I shrugged it off and told myself I would just go home at lunch to get it. Elle texted me throughout the day talking about all the casual stuff. A couple talked about, like, what do you want for dinner? I did the laundry, do you want me to hang it up for you? Blah, blah, blah. I didn't think it necessary to text her that. I was coming home for lunch, so when it came around, I just left work and went home. When I got home, I noticed a car that looked like my father's in our parking lot, but I didn't think anything of it. just parked and went into our building. When I opened the door, I was met with a scene from a movie where a man comes home early and catches his spouse cheating. Such a cliché. There was a trail of clothes, both his and hers, leading to my bedroom, and the sound of faint moans echoed through my apartment. I stood at the door in utter shock. My brain was a mix of rage, sadness, and disgust. But if you were a fly on my wall, you would see what looked like a statue. I just couldn't move. When I finally snapped to, not knowing how much time had passed, I took out my phone to record. I picked up all the clothes that were on the floor and threw them into the hall of the building. After I filmed the walk to my bedroom, the door was open, so I stood in the doorway filming for about a minute, then flipped on the lights. They both jumped at the sudden light and looked at me, into my utter shock. It was my father in the bed with her. After the initial stun, my father noticed I was recording and started to panic, trying to find anything to cover himself and telling me to stop recording. He found a towel and wrapped it around himself and started to walk toward me. I told him, if you don't want to get hurt, stop coming to me. He either didn't care or didn't hear me and reached for my phone. I hit him square on the jaw. His head bounced off the door and slumped to the ground. Elle shrieked. I aimed the camera at Alan, said, concerned about your F-buddy, but nothing to say to your fiancé? My father woke up after about a minute nap, and I told him I just needed to come pick something up for work. So I'm heading back now. If either of you pieces of SHTS are here when I get back, I'll send this video to everyone you know. I ended the video, looked at my dad, who was still coming, too, and said, you're dead to me. You're no longer my father. But you might want to go home and talk to Mom, because I'll be talking to her very soon. I sat in my car for a while until one of the bosses at work called to ask where I was. I told her I was on my way back right now. When I got to her office to hand her the paperwork, I must have looked awful because she started asking what was wrong with me. I told her it was nothing and I'd be okay. I could see her scanning me up and down, and she noticed some blood on my collar, stood up and rushed to me and said, you're bleeding. I looked down and said it was my father's. She looked confused, so I pulled out my phone and showed her the video. She watched it in its entirety. She was introduced to, well, a few times, but never my father. She sat there silent for a moment until it finally clicked that my fiancé was cheating on me. But not only was she cheating, it was with my father. She asked if there was anything she could do, suggesting I take some time off, but I told her I can't go back there right now, that I just need a minute and I'll be fine for the meeting. And I have another shirt in my office. The meeting went over fine. I put on a smile for everyone like nothing had happened. My boss came up to me after the meeting and asked how I could do that, but I just said I didn't know and went to my office. I then came home, and I was alone for the first time in a very long time. I just don't know what to do. I definitely need to get the hell out of this apartment. I just can't live here anymore, and there's no possible way I'm sleeping in that bed. I know. Not only do I have to go get checked out, for STDs, but I think I broke something in my hand. I tried to get into contact with my mother, but none of my calls were connecting. I wanted to see if she would get lunch with me and I tell her everything. After about a dozen tries, I decided to get into my car and go to my mother's house. She needed to know what happened as soon as possible, even if talking about this was going to make it hurt all over again. During the drive, I thought about what I would say and how I would say it. That made me start to panic. I had to pull over twice to throw up. It's not every day you have to tell your mom that her husband is screwing your fiancé. I pulled into the driveway and sat in my car for a moment to calm down and gather my thoughts. I was in my car for a few minutes when my mother threw her front door open, so I stepped out of my car. She started cursing at me, saying, how dare I come to her home after I hit my father for trying to break up a fight between Al and I, huh? Did I hear that right? Someone tell Brody that I have a video of him screwing my fiancé. She called me every name in the book and called me an abuser. She told me I needed to leave since Elle isn't ready to forgive me yet. That if she's smart, she hopefully never will. Yes. Apparently. My father took Elle to my family's home and told my mom that Elle and I argued. And when my father tried to spot it, I hit him. She continued on for a while until I finally snapped and said, really, Mom? Because your husband is effing my fiancé. That's why I hit him. And if you can't take my word for it, I have a video. I'll send it to you. But because my own mother can talk to me like this, don't expect to see me again. I don't want to hear your apology when you finally figure out that you're just as poop of a mom as my piece of poop father. Her face dropped, and she looked like what I must have looked like when I first walked into my apartment and caught them. I pulled out my phone and sent her the video. She watched up. Until the part where I turned on the light. She then put her phone down. She looked up at me, but I turned and went into my car. I backed out of her driveway. I looked at her before I took off, and she was in tears. My heart felt for her, but too much was said during that fight for me to pull back in and forgive her. When I got home, I started clearing everything out of my apartment that had to do with Elle or my family. I boxed all of Elle's things up and put them next to the front door. Legally, this has been her place of residence, so I can't technically kick her out. Her name isn't on the lease. Also, She's the type of person who shies away from conflict, and if she returns other than to pick her things up, there will be plenty of conflict. Anything that had to do with my parents, I boxed up and put into storage. We were a very close family, but I've never had a problem cutting toxic people out of my life. I texted Elle's parents and told them that I'm calling off the engagement, as she's been cheating on me. I thank them for everything they've done for me. Our relationship was still building, but they were kind and supportive of me, so this just added more hurt to the mix. I finished by asking if they would come pick up all of her belongings. I haven't gotten a response from them yet, but I'm hoping they will come grab her things so Elle doesn't have a reason to come back here.